This video is going to be about modifying and mounting the trolling motor. But first I want to give you a brief review on my speed controller and how I fabricate it. It's mounted inside of a waterproof electrical junction box. And this is the potentiometer that I take out of the trolling motor. That's the initiating alarm that I take out of the trolling motor. And the arms are made out of 1/4-inch marine board with an oak handle. I attached a handle to this potentiometer with a piece of aluminum dowel that I drilled out and tapped with set screws that connect the handle to the potentiometer. And then it's got a quick disconnect which I can connect or take off the kayak, and that goes back to the trolling motor. And that's a ball mount that mounts to the kayak. Now this is the beginning of my trolling motor. I'm going to unpack it here and give you a little bit of view on that, and then we'll go right into modifying it. The trolling motor I use is a Haswing. It's a Haswing brushless trolling motor. It's called the Protruer 1.0, and it's 65 pounds of thrust with 12 volts. And I've used it on all of my kayak builds. And I was introduced to this motor when I bought my Bonafide. It came with, the kayak came with the Haswing motor on it, and I've just been sold on it ever since. It's a very cost-effective brushless motor. Now I'm going to get into the modifications of the trolling motor and how I modify it so that I can use it on my kayak builds. First thing I'm going to do is dismantle the whole top end. What I just cut loose there and removed was the voltage meter that is in the top plate. It's just to show you what the voltage is going to your motor. I don't need that, so. What I'm doing here is breaking down the wiring and removing the parts that I need and discarding the parts that I don't need. That's the power cable that comes with it, and I will reuse that. Now I'm removing the tiller handle that has the potentiometer or speed controller built into it. And I'm going to remove the potentiometer and the initiation alarm from that head. But right now I'm removing the motor mount and the stop on the trolling motor shaft. Now I'm removing the potentiometer, actually the tiller handle and the potentiometer from the head assembly. My very first build from scratch, I was reluctant to cut the shaft down on the trolling motor. So it had a 35-inch shaft sticking out of it. I've since then, in my last 5 builds, I have become quite comfortable with cutting the shaft down on these motors. And each time I get a little more efficient. What I'm going to do now is cut the initiation alarm out of the head because I'm going to reuse that in my speed controller. I'm cutting it out of the plastic with a Dremel so that I don't damage it because it's quite fragile. Alright, I'm going to cut this shaft now and I'll show you how I go about it. I cut 11 inches off of it, which gives me a 24-inch shaft instead of a 35. I'm using a pipe cutter to cut through this aluminum tubing. It's heavy wall aluminum, so it's pretty thick. In the past, I would dig out the plug that's in the top half of this shaft because I thought it necessary to make the cut. But I've since learned that I can actually push the plug down through the shaft, as I'm doing here. And I use a piece of U-shaped aluminum to do this so I don't damage the wiring. And there they are. Oh, they're two silicone plugs that seal the shaft from anything getting down into the motor. I'm going to push that first plug in its little ways. And then I'm going to push the second plug in on top of it. And that seals everything. That also protects the wiring from the burr that's created by the pipe cutter. And that's done. Now I'm going to work on the mount. There's 2 thumb screws that connect to a raised portion. I don't use that. I don't use that because it tends to raise the motor up higher than I want it to be. So I cut that section off and I mount the motor permanently. That's what it looks like. I do mount a piece of 3/4 inch marine board in between those two arms to give me a thicker base to bolt down to the trolling motor mount, which you see there. All right, I'm going to mount this now. I've attached a 3/4 inch 90, which I drilled and tapped the shaft to take a 1024 short screw to hold that 90 in place. And then that 3/4 inch allows my 3/4 inch tubing to go inside, and actually I can cover all those wires with it. What you see coming out of there are 2 power wires and 1 4-wire cable, which controls the magnets inside of the motor. It's a magnetic induction motor instead of a brushed motor, which has brushes in it, which create heat and are less efficient than a brushless motor. This whole motor assembly and mounting has been very successful for me, so I use it on all my builds. It's a little time consuming. It would be easier to put a block on the back of the mount and just use the regular thumb screws that come with the trolling motor, which I suppose that would be easier if you wanted to remove the motor, but I just like this better because it's much cleaner look and lowers the motor down, and there's less exposure out the top. Now I'm mounting the steering arm, attaching the steering arm to the shaft. And that arm is what my cables from the foot controls will attach to. This assembly works so smoothly and so easily that it's almost unbelievable. I'm going to assemble the prop. And you'll notice by extending the motor mount 3 inches out the back allows the motor itself to clear the stern, which means if I get in shallow water, I can raise the motor to where the bottom of the prop is actually above the bottom of the keel, and I can be in water very, very shallow. As long as the keel is not dragging on the bottom, I can have the trolling motor prop clearing the bottom. Which means I don't have to get out and pull very often. also comes with an anode. This is such a good trolling motor. The one I had on my Bonafide I had for 6 years and never saw the first sign of any rust. I had a Minn Kota Riptide and it was constantly, the bearing was constantly rusting, even with the anode on it. This particular motor is just such a good quality motor. I can't say enough good things about it. That's it for this part of the build. Stay tuned for more.